Anchorpete here, and I am hoping that at this point you are also fans of the show Raised by Wolves, which is on HBO Max. Because even though it is not based on a comic or connected to comic books at all, we are covering it on this channel. And I have the great pleasure to cover it with my good friend over there, Mr. Dr. Zayas himself, Danny Torkel. Danny, how you doing tonight?
Good. Well, everything's good. Got these 2 episodes done yesterday, back to back. Really enjoyed them. I think it's nice that about an hour before we just went live, I saw some people on Twitter posting things about these episodes going, are we the only people who loved Raised by Wolves? And I was like, no, we're not. You should come and watch our live video soon on our channel. And I tried to plug our stuff because it seems like there is a little bit of buzz about season 2 beginning. So that's good.
Yeah. You know what? I want to do a little bit of plugging real quick before we get the show rolling. One of the guys that I interviewed for our other channel, which is the Lasser Cast, that's our horror channel, is an author named Philip Fricazzi. There you go. Danny's rocking a horror shirt over there.
Of course.
And as always. But Philip Fricazzi wrote this awesome book called Boys in the Valley, which I reviewed on that channel. And he did a great interview, and he also plugged our interview recently in his Facebook group. So I appreciate that. I just want to say thank you to him. And you guys should check out his book, Boys in the Valley. Besides that, I was also going to record today with a guy named Damien from Filmsplaining. We were going to talk about Dragon Ball Super, but the power was out in my house today for a couple of hours, so I didn't get a chance to do that. Push back this video too. So I just want to give out a shout out to Damien as well. And we'll be talking about Dragon Ball Super on this channel too at some point. Anyway, Danny, we got 2 episodes into the new season of Raised by Wolves. Are you digging it? Like from what you saw last season, is it on the same level? Do you feel like it's not as good? How are you feeling about this new season so far?
I think it's a really good continuation. I like it. It's a very stark turn from where we were. Obviously, we're in the tropical zone now, which was kind of like this red herring that they kept throwing out there during season 1, to the point where I was kind of under the impression, is there even a tropical zone on this planet?
Right.
Turns out there is, and they're there now. Everybody's there. By the end of the 2nd episode, we see, I think, every returning character from season 1, including the Mithraic clergy that I thought had disappeared. I was like, oh, there they are. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have been very happy with the show so far. I took a few notes on the things that I particularly liked, but I think they're doing a very good job of continuing what I really liked in part in season 1. And I think they've introduced a few new characters, entities, ideas that I'm kind of digging so far.
Yeah. Well, one thing that hasn't returned from season 1 is the fact that Ridley Scott directed the first episode. So he directed the first episode of season 1. But Danny, I figured that you'd be excited because episode 1 and 2 of this season was directed by Ernest Dickerson.
That's right.
Want to tell people who that is?
Ernest R. Dickerson, he was Spike Lee's longtime cinematographer. And then in the early 90s, he went off on his own. He directed Juice, which was a kick-ass movie when I was like 10 years old. But then he got deep into horror. And a movie coming to Shudder this month that I'm going to talk about on the Lasser Cast because I love it so much. Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight. Ernest R. Dickerson directs that. He was one of the many talking heads in the horror noir documentary on Shudder as well. He has been working for about the last 20 years. If there's been a really popular TV show that you've watched, he's directed episodes of it. Yeah. The Walking Dead, Dexter, The Wire, you name it. This guy's done episodes for it. And when I saw his name attached to the first 2 episodes here, I was like, freaking A, Ernest R. Dickerson, let's go.
Yeah.
Really big fan of his.
Yeah, and I think he did a really great job. I mean, it feels just like any of the other episodes from season 1. It's got that tension. There's definitely a few really jarring moments. And from a guy that's directed Demon Knight, there's definitely some disturbing stuff in that movie, and there's disturbing stuff in both of these episodes. What's interesting about episode 1 in particular is that the script has been completely like flipped at this point, right? Not only are they like, with the other side now, the other faction, the atheists who are now in charge, but they're actually like literally on the other side of the world. Like they've passed through the core of the planet, and now they're in that tropical zone that you mentioned before. So it's like a totally different environment, and they're with people that believe the exact opposite of the people that we stayed with so much in that first season. So are you digging the atheists, or what do you think about them?
I think the dichotomy of the characters is really interesting because you have these hardcore atheists, but amongst the atheists, there's already dissenters. The fact that the two androids, mother and father, are raising, aside from Campion, they kidnapped all the kids that they kidnapped were Mithraic kids off of the Ark. So all of the atheists in the new tropical zone camp, the collective, they hate them, and there's actually a hate crime done to their new camp. And the leader of the collective is like a giant supercomputer robot, which looks amazing, called the Trust.
Right.
And like there were parts of that first episode where it felt right out of a video game.
Oh, yeah.
Like it could have been a cutscene in Halo or one of like Skyrim or any of these like outer space type video games.
Yeah.
And I was so into that idea, and I love like every day they get a new task, and it seems like it's at random. I like that father enjoys that there's justice.
Yes.
And the way that justice is delivered to the people is very interesting.
Yeah.
And then you still have Marcus running around, and Marcus finds a cave with almost a monument to Saul in it, and you're like, whoa, what's going on? Plus there's hints that the voice we were hearing in season 1 is some kind of a signal. So I'm really liking how the different groups, especially how the atheists are treating these, and they also hate the fact, obviously, that Mother was created as a Mithraic necromancer.
Right.
I feel like I'm speaking another language talking about this show. It's like, oh yeah, these are common words that we use. Mithraic necromancer.
Sometimes I feel like we're talking about the movie The Chronicles of Riddick. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah, well, Pitch Black was one of my favorite movies. Like, I remember seeing that movie and being like, Vin Diesel's freaking awesome. And then like 10 years later being like, oh, Vin Diesel. Like, Vin Diesel in that movie was awesome. That was a fun movie, Pitch Black. And then Chronicles of Riddick. And then I think there was a regular, just Riddick.
Yeah.
That was a good. And then there was an anime series, I think, that they like spawned the whole universe off of that Pitch Black movie.
Yeah. It's just like, I always think of the Chronicles of Riddick when you're talking about the stuff with the atheists and stuff, because it like religion is such a huge part of this show. And this show is also so like dour and gray, just like that Chronicles of Riddick movie too. And everybody in this show, just like in that movie, they just play it for real. Like they just are acting like they are in this world, and you believe them. It's totally believable. It's not like, a lesser made show that maybe like, sorry, no offense, but like on the CW, where it's like you can kind of tell that like the people don't care about the mythology or whatever, it's just a gig. Like this, it's like it feels like a real world, a real future. But what I was going to say is that you talked about the trust, and the trust reminds me of something from comic books too. And you might remember this from the Captain Marvel movie, but the Kree have their own kind of like super intelligence. It's like an artificial intelligence that kind of reminded me of this thing, the trust. And then also it's interesting because last time you and I talked, we talked about the similarities between Alien and Prometheus and this, right? And with Alien and Prometheus, you have like the androids, but then you also do have Mother too, which is like Mother's not an android; it's just like an AI that like runs things. And so I felt like the Trust was kind of like Mother too.
Yeah, and I like how I think his name is Cleaver on the show. Peter Christopherson. He's like the human leader of the tropical zone, and he's like, that's what we love. That's what they're waiting for the Trust to pass the baton to an atheist leader.
Right.
And Mother is trying to push it so that it goes to Campion.
Right.
But Cleaver makes like this point about how we trust in the Trust,
right?
Because it's a computer and it doesn't have any emotions at all. It doesn't care about any of the trivial reasons why human beings argue and fight. It just thinks about what's best for everybody as a total AI.
Right.
And there's a lot to that. And but like one of the things about Campion is Campion has admitted that he does believe in Saul. And so he is but like he believes Saul is evil, whereas Paul is convinced, like Marcus, that he is God, like I don't know what the word is, that he's a bountiful God or a good God,
Right. Well, it's just real interesting because first off, with what you're saying, I feel like the Trust is going to be sinister at some point, and even though it's supposed to be this benevolent thing that's looking out for humanity, it's going to do something. And we're already kind of seeing shades of that. It already kind of has this like almost like 1984 kind of feel where they like repeat phrases where they say like violence is pain, pain is violence. They say stuff like that. Everyone's given a specific task. It definitely feels kind of like Orwellian, like whether it's Animal Farm or 1984. That's sort of that dystopian kind of society. And it's interesting too. I think this is said in episode 2 by Sue, right? Who's Niama Algar, who we love from Censor. She says something along the lines of, because I think someone asks her like, what did you do to survive, or like, how could you live with yourself after killing Paul's biological parents? And she was like, we were the last of humanity, and so we're not necessarily the best of the best. She said something like that.
Yeah.
I thought that was very telling.
Like when you get to the apocalypse, you don't usually have the best of the best people. It's just the scrappy ones who can survive. And yeah, you were bringing up, you were talking about like 1984, and there's also, whenever I think about robots in movies, I always go back to iRobot and the work of Asimov, and the idea that like robots are built by humans with the idea that they will be able to identify all the problems. And what always happens in science fiction is the robots identify that humans are the problems.
Right.
And that, to me, like what you said with the Trust, it seems like Mother has that idea at some point, like, and I feel like the Trust is going to have that idea at some point, where it's like, we're robots, we need to save humanity from itself, and that means extinguishing humanity. Right. That always happens in every like sci-fi advanced tech story, and I feel like we're just building to that.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the HBO Westworld show, or no?
I haven't. No, I didn't have HBO when HBO Max started. So like we just got HBO not that long ago. So I'm now that I have it, maybe I'll dig into Westworld.
Yeah, because with these modern shows, like there's Battlestar Galactica, like the reboot, then there's Westworld, and now this. And all of them kind of have this idea of like the blurring the lines of like what's human and what's biological and what's an android. And there's always this like crossover. And sometimes, like on Battlestar Galactica, there's a time when there's a baby that's conceived. That's kind of like on this show, where like all of a sudden androids can do more human things, humans can do more android things. There's this overlapping. And I always think of Westworld and Battlestar Galactica when I think of this show. and Mother. And what's interesting about all three of these shows that I'm referencing is that there's always this sort of allusion to there being like a special either human or special android that's going to kind of like save everyone, or it's like the chosen one. And in this, there's the idea that Saul has a person that's going to bring a city of peace. That's what Paul keeps referring to, right? Even in this season, he's referring to a city of peace.
The prophecy.
The prophecy. And the idea of the prophecy is that it's an orphan boy who's
a child of war.
Right.
And I like that you have two characters,
at least
Marcus and Paul, who both believe that they are the prodigal son. And they're both dealing with that separately. I think that's very interesting, especially Marcus, because Marcus started as an atheist.
Yeah.
And like found and became a zealot, and now he's, starting his own cave Church of Saul, or cult to Saul. And I agree. There usually is. I mean, that goes even past sci-fi. That's like a lot of fantasy stuff. Like, I mean, Harry Potter was based on a prophecy, and how there were only certain children that could have fulfilled the prophecy, and and that's why Voldemort went to try to kill Harry before he was born. When he was a baby, was because of this prophecy.
Right.
I like what you were saying about how there's an android and the humans, and you can't tell which is which. And all I could think of was, oh, you mean like when Mother, the android, was lactating?
Yes.
Yeah. That was a little, yes, that was weird. Like a lactating android. Yeah, that's what happens on this show.
Is definitely freaking weird, that's for sure. You were talking about Marcus. I actually really wanted to talk about Marcus's side. So in that first episode, he saves two people that run away from the atheist camp. There was three of them, but one of them blew up because they have one of those packs on them, and he's able to take the pack off. And now you have these new characters. You have let's see, you got their names written down here.
Decima
and Viril, right?
I'm not. I just know that she has like an android who has like the mind of her daughter.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, like a little girl android and Decima. And Decima is this person that was a prisoner of the atheists, but she's a Mithraic. And it seems like there might be like a little bit of a romance down the line with Decima and Marcus. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, I kind of thought it already. That they were building to that, and that's what the scene we were going to see. But then they cut. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so he's definitely starting to form his own little church, and he gets more followers in the second episode. But I was going to ask you, like, what the fuck actually happened to him in that first season? Like, they put something in his mouth. I never understood what that was about. Like, they put some kind of weird thing in his mouth. And he started foaming from the mouth, and he got those weird veins on his face.
Yeah, I think that it's for him. It's every time that they've tried to like kill him, he survives somehow. And I think that just emboldens his faith in Saul. Like he even tries like the opening of the first episode is him basically trying to suicide bomb the tropical zone, and the Trust takes over his plane as he's trying to crash it. So it's like nothing he does. Yeah, every time he's about to get killed in some horrific way, he survives. Like so yeah, I do love the way he looks, because he now with like these crazy veins, like purple veins going down his face, because he already had like the scar on his cheek, but now he looks like a crazy cult leader. And I mean, but like again, the thing is, he finds a cave with the symbol of Saul. So there's that part of your brain that's left to think, there's obviously been on this planet, there's been Mithraic people before.
Yeah.
They keep finding those like rectangular metal pieces that are like, I guess, are like pages of the Mithraic Bible.
Right.
And so there's also like those weird humanoid people, like monster looking things in the cloaks from the end of season 1 are just walking around in the tropical zone now. And you're like, oh, okay. So
Yeah.
there were obviously people on this planet long before.
Yeah.
And again, that just, I feel like there's going to be like this idea of history repeating itself. And then the trust is going to be like, oh, well, we can't trust humans. And, and I feel like the setup for season 3 is going to end up being where they have to, like, the humans end up uniting somehow against the trust. I don't know, maybe.
No, I think you're right, but that's the thing, is this show is like very, very unpredictable. I am always like super impressed when I can watch a show and not know what's going to happen next. A lot of times when I watch something, I'm like, okay, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. But with this, it's like all over the fucking place, and people switch sides left and right. You know, like, just to think of where we started in the first episode to now, it's just like crazy. And I'm actually surprised a lot of these characters have lived this long. Like, I totally thought some of those Mithraic kids were going to die, but they're all back in this episode. And I think they're going to have.
And I just want to bring up, because you mentioned like all the Mithraic kids. I think that the writing of this show does such a good job. Excuse me, to give each of these characters like their own personality. You have like the 5 Mithraic kids, but they're believers, but they also have like grown to kind of love mother and father and trust them to be to watch over them, varying levels. Like I know the pregnant girl has a very close connection with mother. You know, the older boy, Hunter, I think his name is, doesn't, you know, it took him a long time to build up that trust. But they're all so well written, and it allows the show to really bounce all over the place, from, you know, Marcus and his new kind of cave cult back to, you know, you have Mother and Sue are kind of like forming a bond now. Mother and father have these great conversations where, again, it's like divorced parents forced to live together, even though they're androids. And again, Amanda Collin and Abubakar Salim are tremendous. Amanda Collin has one of the great crazy faces. Where like, it feels like they say to her, we need you to smile weirdly. And she just gives like that. Like, and you're just like, it makes like your skin crawl. Cause like it's like you've never smiled before. Yeah. Try to smile and you, but she's so good at it. And
you're on the money.
It works because of her character on the show.
Yeah, she's incredible, because it's always supposed to be like she's trying to be this like loving caretaker character, but it's just, she's just off. I mean, you feel the robot, you feel the metal beneath her. You know, it's just like, it's not there. It's not human, you know, and she does a fantastic job. And sometimes she does that kind of like that whispery kind of threatening voice to, like, why did you do that? And she'll switch on a dime too, where she'll be like all smiling, like you said, and then she's like, why did you do that? And she's so good. And yeah, father is fantastic too. Tempest is the name of the pregnant girl. And all of them are like older, obviously, because the first season was in 2020. This is, you know, 2022. And, you know, I don't know how much of a gap of time there is between season 1 and season 2. I would assume it's a couple of months. And Mother even makes a comment in the first episode where she's like, Campion, your voice has dropped down a whole octave or whatever.
This show got hit with the It Chapter 2 effects, where there's a problem when you work with kid actors, and and then there's a delay between seasons because, I mean, Winta McGrath is the actor who plays Campion.
Yes.
He reminded me of Mike in Stranger Things,
Sure.
where there was a huge difference between Finn Wolfhard season 1 and Finn Wolfhard season 2, where it was like, whoa. And he had that like, and all of a sudden, Campion has this like deep voice, and you're like, okay, somebody grew up a little bit.
Someone's gone through puberty. Yeah.
I actually wrote in big capital letters, puberty. I mean, but like that's just what happens when you work with kid actors. Like it's a given. And like, good for them for writing in the line about how his voice deepened. Like, because it's hard to not acknowledge it.
Right. Yeah. It's
and I think he does a really good job. And like the show relies on kid actors a lot. And like his scenes with Paul are really good. I like their kind of the relationship that they have, where they like agree to be best friends, even though they have completely contrasting views. And Campion loves Mother and Father, and Paul hates Mother specifically.
Right.
So that's an interesting relationship on its own.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you were kind of giving praise to the writing and the differences between the characters and stuff. The thing is, this show has never been boring. I mean, at this point, we've watched 12 episodes of it, and there's just always these little twists and these things that you're not even thinking are going to happen. You're like, well, what the fuck is going on? Like, we haven't even talked about the fact that there is this giant lizard, this snake, they're just floating around, right? And so in the first episode, that one was called The Collective. That's when the survivors get introduced to the new collective and the Tempest tropical zone. The second episode is entitled 7, which is in reference to that 7th child, which is this fucking serpent monster.
I'm embarrassed that I didn't realize what the episode was about by the title, because they've talked about like, we're sorry that you lost number 7, Mother, and like her and Father know that they didn't lose the baby.
Correct.
They watched it float away.
Right.
And now it's like gigantic and everything, and
it becomes a big focus of the second episode, and we see that dynamic of, like you said, where Mother and Father kind of, he wants it to be destroyed. She's saying that she's going to destroy it, but you can tell that she doesn't want to destroy it. And that's kind of the way that the second episode ends off. But we see a little bit of Marcus and his scheming in the second episode, and then we also see that a guy that Mother beat up in the first episode goes and joins Marcus's group. See, like you were talking about before, that the collective or the trust gives everyone an assignment every day. Well, the trust had Mother be the Punisher and beat the crap out of this guy that had done something to her family. And so they put on this like ancient mask. Do you think that's from like the ruins too? Like the Mithraic ruins?
Cleaver or somebody describes it as, we usually don't want the wronged party to do, so like they cover the face of the Punisher so that there's no jealousy towards that person. So I don't know where they found the mask, but it looks badass and scary.
Yeah.
I just want to you mentioned the end of the second episode where like Mother goes after 7.
Yeah, we'll call it 7. Yeah.
And that scene to me is one of my favorite ending shots of an episode of any show I think I've ever watched. She like picks up this gigantic gun, like it looks like a double-pronged rocket launcher thing that looks like no human being can hold it. Right. It would have fit perfectly in Aliens,
right?
Amongst the Space Marines. And then she takes this as an android and just walks like into the sun, like towards like the desert sunset.
Yep.
And it's just this beautiful shot. And you're just like, she's not going to kill 7 because she said she would.
Yeah.
but I love that shot of her walking off. It felt very like space western.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember too, like, because I thought there would be more to the episode, and I thought that was like going to be the second to last scene, but then that last shot was just so great, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, I think it's probably going along with the main theme of this season, which will be like the collective versus Seven, and they're like hunting Seven. And I feel like it might be kind of like an alien type thing now. Like, it'll be like Prometheus or even Alien Covenant, where you have these survivors that are on this planet, and maybe this thing is picking them off one by one. It started to pick off people in this episode. And even that was a surprise to me too, because like Father and some of the kids are out collecting and stuff, gathering some things, and Seven comes in and everyone runs into this little fucking bunker. And I thought one of the Mithraic kids was going to get eaten at this point. I thought it was going to be kind of an upsetting thing. But then like the snake like grabbed a hook or whatever and brought the people in the bunker into the water, but
which is acid.
Is acid, right? Which that's like alien too.
Which that was also really cool that they had like in the tropical zone, they make like there's like ocean water around, but it's acid that humans can't touch, and a couple of atheist soldiers chase Marcus into the cave, and the cave floods, and they just like melt in the acid water, and it's like, there's a lot to this. Like they put in so much thought to the universe here.
Yeah.
And like we talked about that in our review of season 1, the world building and like all the little things that they did to set up the world. And this was before we ever got to the tropical zone. So now it's like the tropical zone. They have all this like exotic food that's growing off of like, I've watched too many movies where like I'm not going to just walk onto a new planet, pick like a plum looking fruit off a tree and just eat it.
Right. And
they're like, it's good. I'm like, no.
Well, they have that one fruit that's like hanging from a tree, but it kind of looks like a cocoon for like a moth or something. I'm like, I'm not gonna eat that one. I'm good.
Yeah, and like Marcus and Decima are eating something later that looks like some kind of like anemone or sea creature, and I'm just like, nope, no.
Yeah. The design of the whole world is so interesting, and we kind of talked about this in the first episode too. That the Mithraic had this appearance that was like kind of like the Crusades. They were like Crusaders, right, with their white on and stuff. And it's kind of interesting because the atheists kind of have that look too. It's like warfare has gone full circle, and both sides look like they're from medieval times. And I was wondering if that was maybe a production thing, like to save some money, because like obviously Ridley Scott has made movies with that kind of medieval look. Even was that The Last Duel that just came out? And I wonder if there's any kind of taking props from one of his other movies and using it for this show.
It's funny. On Friday I showed in freshman global history, we watched Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven, which takes place in the Middle Ages during the Crusades, and there are knights dressed very similar to the Mithraic, and then there are also knights that are dressed closer to what the atheists are wearing. So who knows? Ridley Scott's been making these like epic scale things for a long time. He only directed, I know, the 2 episodes, but his son did 3. So he was heavily involved in season 1 at least.
Yeah. And I mean, with a sci-fi show, like let's just say Star Trek, for instance, they would always take props from previous seasons or other episodes and like use them in, newer episodes, or they take props from the movies and put them into the shows and stuff. So I would not be surprised if they took some stuff from like Kingdom of Heaven or The Last Duel or any other kind of Ridley thing like that and put it into this show. But I love the world. They got friggin' tanks now at this point. They got like friggin' bombers. Marcus and his crew hijack a tank at one point, and I was just trying to think like what happened finally with that. I think like they made the guy come out of the tank, and then they shot one of the guys, or they shot 2 of them, right? But then that was it, right?
The other guy died And they were like, Marcus was upset because he wants to like convert everybody, like literally one by one, to back to the cult of Saul or the whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's two really interesting things in that part too, because one part is he says, I don't want to tell you how to think. I just want you to make you the best version of yourself that Saul made you, like the version that Saul made of you, you know? So like, he's not going to force them to be religious, just like he was forced into serving the atheists as a soldier, you know? He doesn't want to force his will into anybody. I really like that scene. And then also, when they get the tank, they find out that everyone is hunting Seven, and the idea is that Seven is very hot, like the snake itself is very hot, and they think that it might be this kind of flaming sword of the orphan that's supposed to lead everyone to the city of peace. So I thought that was an interesting little twist too.
I mean, that's real, you know, faith and religion is you can try basically take anything and, you know, have it fit the narrative of the scriptures or the beliefs or whatever they are. You know, Paul does that with he finds that box, the Hellraiser box almost. And at first he thinks it's a map. Then he thinks there's seeds inside that will grow the tree, the tree of life that the Mithraic will follow, that will like be the center of their camp, and like anything can be used to fit the like that, like the fact that both Paul and Marcus believe they're the prodigal child. It shows like they're fitting their own personal narrative into the story, and there's okay, here we go, where I'm this character that was written about, so follow me. And then if you can convince one person, you can convince more people, and
right,
that's how cults are born.
Well, yeah, but that's the idea with the different religions. And if you give me a second, I kind of want to go a little off here for a second. You tell me if I'm a lunatic or not. But like, there's also Norse mythology. Obviously, we've been dealing with Christian ideology or Christian religion, right? With the serpent, and then there's a tree, and there's a tree of wisdom or a tree of knowledge, right? But with Norse mythology, you also have the tree too, which this is all in the Thor fucking movies too. Mm-hmm. But there's Yggdrasil, the tree, and then there's a giant serpent that's supposed to eat the world in what's called Ragnarok, which is like the Norse mythology version of the apocalypse, you know? And the very title of the show is called Raised by Wolves. And wolves are a big part of Norse mythology too. Like there's a giant wolf in Norse mythology. I think it's called Fenris. And I think it's like Loki's son. And I just wonder, maybe I'm just a lunatic here, but like, I wonder if one of the commentaries of this show is like what you're saying, where it's like appropriating imagery to become your religion. Because that's one thing that like Christianity did, right? Was they would take like stuff from pagan religions and make it fit into their Christianity. You know?
Yeah, I think that definitely could be part of it. I mean, Raised by Wolves, they hinted that in season 1 is, you know, a nod to obviously Romulus and Remus. But if you look at like historically, like if you even look at Jesus, like the story of Jesus is the same as, I think it's the story of Horus in ancient Egypt, is almost exactly the same. There's like an Egyptian pharaoh that is like almost the same story, beat by beat, to Jesus. And we're not here dispelling religion. We're just, you know, mentioning that, like, yeah, like you said, different religions. It's funny, you know, Athena and I this afternoon, we went to see this little movie called Belfast. It's gotten a lot of like buzz around the Oscars. Kenneth Branagh did it. Speaking of Thor. And it's kind of autobiographical because he grew up in 1960s Northern Ireland. And basically there's civil war there between Catholics and Protestants. And those are two versions of the same religion. And they're fighting and killing each other because of like the differences. And yeah, if you go back in history, you can always find, like you said, Christianity borrowing from pagan traditions. The fact that the Egyptian, the Greeks, and the Romans all pretty much have the same gods, just with different names. Yeah, I think that it's one of the things that, why religion is appealing to so many people is that there's, there all the story. It's effectively, it's long stories that if you take the zealotry out of religion, they're great stories.
Absolutely.
That's why we, as kids, we all love Greek mythology.
Right.
So, I do think that, I don't think you're crazy to think that. I think it's almost a simplistic view to think that this is just Christianity and atheism. And to the point where the atheists on this show, atheism is their religion. Like,
oh, yes.
there's being an atheist and saying, I don't believe in anything. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in religion, whatever. You could be agnostic or an atheist. And then there's being a zealous atheist and being like, no, there's no God. And if you don't believe me about there being no God, I'm going to kill you. Well, now you are effectively turned your atheism into a religion.
Right.
And that's one of the things that is completely fascinating about this show is that every character, there's this kind of idea of where is their allegiance, to who is their allegiance. Are they more on the side of their faith or to the people around them or to the androids around them? And I think it's probably the main reason I really like the show so much, because, there is, when you break down the sci-fi stuff, a lot of the sci-fi stuff is stuff that we've seen before. We've compared this to Prometheus, to Dune, obviously Alien. We're bringing up iRobot and Isaac Asimov in 1984. So the sci-fi stuff is stuff that we've kind of seen before. We haven't really seen it with this, the religious aspects or the ideas of the theocratic and psychological aspects and the characters the way that this show does.
Right. I completely agree. And just one other thing too, if you ever do get a chance, Danny, to watch Battlestar Galactica, and because if you're digging this show a lot, I think you would dig that show, because one of the interesting things about that show is that they have the humans. They have these different colonies, and the colonies are based on kind of like gods that are like the Greek gods, but they're in outer space, so it's not like this is Zeus and this is Apollo. It's like their religion. Their religion is a polytheistic.
How many seasons of the new Battlestar are there?
I think there's 5 altogether, but they're not.
I have some friends. I have some friends that love it, and I know that Athena and I if we watch 1 or 2 episodes, we typically get hooked on a new show. Maybe we'll delve into it.
Yeah.
Where is it available?
Peacock. I think it's Peacock.
Oh, wait, okay. I
might be wrong though. Yeah. But then, so there's that. But then what's interesting about that is that the androids, they're called Cylons, right? And the Cylons actually have their own religion, but the Cylons believe in just one God. So it's kind of interesting that usually when you have an alien race or something that's different from human, usually they're the ones that have all the different gods, and we just have our one God. But in that show, it's like the humans have multiple gods, and then there's just the one Cylon God. So, like you said, we see a lot of these things in sci-fi, and we see it on this show. But I think what you were saying before is that it's really the way the characters interact with each other and how they interact with their beliefs. And I definitely 100% think that it's the characters on this show that are making me want to come back to it every episode and watch it, whether it's Mother, who's just this sort of villain that you kind of have this remorse for. She's kind of the protagonist. She's kind of the antagonist. She's both. Marcus, who you kind of feel sorry for, but yet he's completely lost his mind and changed who he is. And then all the kids are great. I have a big thing in my heart for Hunter. He's the Mithraic boy. I like him a lot. And then, of course, Father. absolute favorite. You know,
Yeah. I love the line in so in the second episode, they're going out to hunt Seven, the giant serpent, and the Mithraic clergy, who I thought had died. I really
right.
like, they kind of like disappeared at the end of season 1. I was like, oh, they must have like just died off screen.
Right.
They got captured by the atheists, and they're wearing the bomb collars a la Running Man.
Right.
And one of them turns to Father and goes, how are we supposed to go out and hunt this thing without weapons? And Father, with like the biggest smile on his face, goes, oh, I believe you misunderstood. You are the weapons. And his line reads are the best on the show. Abubakar Salim. He's definitely my favorite character. I love his his like divorced dad who's forced to live with mom, relationship with mother, how he loves her, but he's still jealous. And, you know, what does he say to her? He's like, our views align now, so there's no need to erase my memories.
Right.
So he's so good. Yeah. But I can't wait to see the next episode. What is it, Thursdays?
Thursdays. And so I'm thinking with you and I, because just like scheduling wise, we'll probably review it on the weekends, like either Saturday or Sunday, if that's cool with you. And I think it's just one episode per week now at this point.
Yeah, and that's good. I mean, this was fine. I mean, we just did a deep dive into the whole first season, and now, you know, this intro to the new season.
Yeah.
But one episode a week is going to be very good. Give me time to take notes and ponder.
Exactly. And on this channel, Brian and I are still going to meet every Wednesday to talk about Peacemaker and, of course, the Book of Boba Fett, while those are still on. And then, Danny, do you want to just tell people what to expect from our other channel, the Lacercast?
Yeah. So on the Lacercast, probably later tonight, Charlotte and I are going to be filming a review of Hereditary, because I'm the dad who let my 11-year-old watch Hereditary, much to my wife's chagrin. And then also new on Shudder are they put the Boris Karloff collection up there. I have a review of the documentary The Man Behind the Monster, which was fantastic. And I'm going to be reviewing the OG Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, kind of as like a, you know, hey, it's Valentine's Day, Bride of Frankenstein. I think that'll be fun. I also showed Bride of Frankenstein to my horror movie club at school. Yeah. And you would not expect high school kids to enjoy a black and white movie from the 30s, but they did. And I think that tells you all you need to know about that film. But I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to try to get Char to watch those with me too, because I think it's important to pass the classics down. But yeah, that's what the Lacercast is going to be covering. A lot of Shudder stuff this month. A lot of the Boris Karloff collection. Valentine is on Shudder now, and you and I are going to talk about that. Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight is coming. Ernest R. Dickerson. And yeah, some more cool stuff later in the month.
Yeah. So if you guys dug this episode of these last 2 episodes of Raised by Wolves, directed by Ernest Dickerson, then come check out Danny's reviews of Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight. That's one of Danny's favorites. And Danny, I'm on the channel, I'm on the Lacercast, but Danny puts out the most content. He's like a machine, man. He's got multiple things per week. So if you like Danny, I definitely recommend subscribing to the Lacercast. And if you like both of us here, and me in particular, then subscribe to Comic Books Transformed. And we will be here next weekend then to talk about Raised by Wolves Season 2, Episode 3. We'll see y'all.